Welcome to Destination Rural Podcast Series 3. I'm Peter Rutherford. I'm the CEO of the Rural Doctors Association of Australia. And today I'm talking to our current RDAA President, Dr. RT Lewandowski, who is an Australian doctor trained overseas, so has an interesting perspective on leadership, culture, and also the challenges faced by international doctors coming into rural Australia. Hi, RT. Thanks for joining me today. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where both you and I are meeting. I'm on Ngunnawal country in Canberra, and you're up north in Cairns. And so I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and thank you to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners that may be joining us for this podcast episode. So, welcome, RT. Again, thank you for joining me. We've worked together before. Obviously, you're our current Rural Doctors Association of Australia President, but we also work together in Kingaroy, and so I appreciate your time, and I know you're very busy. We'll start the conversation back when you first came to Australia as a locum. What really prompted that decision? And then what prompted the more permanent move as a result of that?
Yeah, so when we came as a locum, we had an opportunity to take sabbatical leave, so it's similar to long service leave. And Australia in America is this exotic land down under where Crocodile Dundee lives. And so we had this sabbatical, and honestly, we thought we'd see this part of the world that we'd never seen. And we really imagined it to be quite a different place than we found it to be. It wasn't quite the jungle infested with crocodiles everywhere. But it was quite lovely. So we came over on that 1 year sabbatical where I did locum work. And then when we came back, the reason we came back is really because of that 1 year. We found the Australian culture to be remarkable. We found the too easy, no worries, mate lifestyle to be wonderful. And that the people were friendly and honest and genuine. And we just really enjoyed the culture, particularly of rural Australia. And so that, along with other things, drew us back to Australia.
So as a locum, how challenging, I guess, even to get into the country? And did you go through an agency or that to help facilitate the placements, or how did that even happen, I guess?
Yeah, I did. We went through an agency called Global Medical, which is different to the Global Medics that's in Australia. It's an American company. And it was difficult. There are lots of hurdles to come in. It took from the time of decision. There were 2 times we came through. Sorry, Peter. The first time it was actually not as hard as the second time. But the APRA didn't exist the first time we came through. So we went through Global Medical. They collected all of our information, some follow-up questions, and we sent that through. And that was actually a pretty quick turnaround. I think maybe a month total. The second time, it was almost a year. But really the same information provided over and over again. To different agencies, and it was really remarkable, the difference. There's no difference in the information at all. And in fact, interestingly, the time it took longer to get in, I was already a registered doctor in Australia.
Wow. So do you think coming, though, as a locum was a good way, like a good introduction, so that you got a good, try before you buy sort of thing? Do you think, that time, and obviously a smoother process, but that it was a really good way to be introduced into the Australian health system, but also into the Australian culture and lifestyle?
Yeah, I think very much so. It could give me that. It's probably the best way to get a true glimpse of what you're going to be doing and where you are. Obviously, there are other ways to do that. You could just jump right in and come permanently. which is obviously a great way to get a taste of the lifestyle and culture because
True.
you're in it and you're stuck in it. But no, it did give me a lot of insight and an opportunity to decide this is what we wanted to do. And in truth, when we came, we had no intention of staying forever. We really intended to come see this exotic country and go back and practice back in my practice in the States. So it's also a great opportunity to introduce Australia to the locum.
So I know as a locum you went to Kingaroy. Did you go anywhere else as a locum, or was it just you found Kingaroy and that was it?
It was just Kingaroy. We went to Ipswich briefly, but that was just for supervision requirements to make sure that I could actually perform the procedures that that I was competent to perform the procedures I was going to be performing under supervision. And then we went to Kingaroy, and that was kind of the idea. We naively selected Kingaroy because we didn't understand Australia. We looked at a map and it looked like it was close to an airport and it had a train that went through it. So we thought we could see the whole country. And we didn't realize how big a place this was. But we still managed to see every capital. We got to every state and traveled quite a bit from Kingaroy. But we always intended to have one base and then travel out from there.
Okay. And when you came over, like as a locum initially, you've got two children, and they were either school age or were they younger then? And did they go to school during that 1 year?
They didn't. No, during the year that we were here as a locum, we homeschooled them. So they were in the school in the States, and the school supplied the curriculum for us. And they did some call-ins here and there, and then we did homeschooling. My wife didn't work during that year, so she was able to school them during the day. And my in-laws came over for a brief time and also did some teaching.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So we'll get into the more permanent move to Kingaroy in a minute, but I guess you've now been involved a little bit in the review by Robin Kruk and the experience for international medical graduates, or as we like to say, Australian doctors trained overseas. What would do you think the report has achieved everything it could have? Or are there still things or key things that you really want to see progressed as a result of the report, and even maybe other enhancements for, our continued reliance on an international workforce?
Yeah, so no, I think the report actually did a really good job of capturing the elements necessary. It obviously did it from a different perspective than it's been done in the past, and that it's really from the perspective of it being, I guess, a market economy almost, and this is a need for Australia. But it did look at fairness, reasonableness for the international, and I think the report itself did capture it really well. I think it did a good job of putting it into context. The report's a report though, and we had the report in 2012, I think, the Lost in the Labyrinth report, which had similar. No, they're not exactly the same findings, and it seems like nothing really came of it. So I guess the proof is in the pudding. We've got the recipe. We'll have to see if it gets put into place.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so you moved to Kingaroy, and this time the kids did go into school. So, and your wife also worked. So I guess what is the importance, or how much support, or did you get and the importance of the support for the family in making those big moves to a rural town?
Yeah. So it's actually pretty critical to get support for the family, and interestingly, there are lots of things that are more difficult than you would think about. We were fortunate in that we went back to Kingaroy, so it was a community that we knew. But when we came back, our first big hurdle was transportation. We had to get to Kingaroy from the airport, and then we had to get around Kingaroy. And but because the way that APRA and all that works out, when we landed in Australia, we actually weren't registered, which means we weren't really employed yet, which means we couldn't rent a car, lease a car, or anything like that, except at international type rates by the kilometer. So it was pretty bonkers, but we did have friends who were able to pick us up, and someone at the hospital loaned us their car for a little while. So that was critical. We had to do things like to get the kids in school, and we didn't have uniforms or know where to get them from. But again, fortunately, someone stepped in, and they showed us where to get some uniforms. They even had some hand-me-downs for the kids, which was great. We didn't have access to the internet, which I know it seems kind of bonkers, and it was a little bit different world. It's probably more accessible now. But interestingly, Deb Frecklington had a cafe in town, and they had free Wi-Fi, so they let us spend quite a bit of time at their cafe using their Wi-Fi, so we could actually get the documents necessary, so we could get established. But it was really critical, and I think of little things like that were really helpful and critical, really, to us getting established in the community. Once we actually were formally employed and could actually move along, it still was a few weeks before we could do things, because we'd never done things in Australia before as Australians.
Yeah, so okay, it's a good insight, I guess, just for people, because as I said, we're so reliant on international doctors coming into the country, but it's the little details that make life a little bit easier for them to settle in.
And there's a presumption, I think, when we go somewhere or do something, we even if we're starting anew in a new town, we think about how we're doing it in the context of how we've done it in the last town. And if you're Australian and move from one town to another, you think of it in that context, I think. And so oftentimes these things aren't purposely omitted, but you still realize the issues with internet, car, establishing, bank account. That was a trick, and things like that.
Yeah. So, as I said, we worked together in Kingaroy, and one of the things I noticed from you was looking at how you developed networks and built relationships and built an amazing team. But I'll touch on the value of having a mentor, particularly someone who's new to the Australian system, and connecting with someone who knows the system well. And obviously, in your case, I'm referring to Dennis Passion, who we all know and love. But really the value of having that, finding a mentor that can help you.
Yeah, well, I think I was so fortunate to have Dennis. So Dennis Passion, of course, was my mentor, and I cannot say enough about him. And it's hard to imagine not having him. But to anyone, I think it is really critical. The Australian system is a great system, and medicine is medicine. People's heart failure isn't different here than anywhere else, but the context of treating that failure is different here. And some of it is with the culture, but some is even with the medicines, how you interact with Medicare and PBS, how the hospital system works, and every country is different in that way. And so you kind of need someone to help guide you through that. You're going to butt your head against the wall many times, and you kind of need someone to help you make sure it's a soft wall, and that mentor is really critical. And talking to colleagues who've come over, there've been varied experiences. There are others who've had really good experiences with mentors. No one I think is as good as Dennis, but there've been some that have been pretty good. And others have had someone who is happy to sign the paperwork. But signing the paperwork is really not the biggest issue that we face. It's really the contextualizing and having someone to debrief with and steer us in the right direction. And it's really, really critical for success, I think, in that transition.
So in addition to Dennis, I know you became a regular attendee at various conferences, would put your hand up to instruct on workshops and things like that. So building even just that broader network, again, particularly for, international doctors coming into the country, like, is that essential or is it a nice to have type thing?
Well, I think it's actually probably I'd list it as an essential. It's certainly nice to have. It's a nice to have essential. Yeah, I think the onus is not purely on the community or the mentor to get anyone, including an international, involved. That we have to put ourselves forward. We have to get involved, and if we want to participate in Australian healthcare or even in Australia, we've got to be involved in Australia. And so I think it is really critical that people do get involved. go to the conferences. You actually will find they're very enlightening, and you'll develop that peer support, which is also a critical element, I think, to success mentally and professionally.
Yeah. And I guess, does it help to have people sort of outside of your immediate workplace, again, to debrief or get advice? So it's not just your immediate sort of team that you liaise with, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's really important not to be just insular. And again, that's where that getting involved in other things, going to conferences, for instance, is a critical part of your development support. It's the again, it's maybe it's not unique to Australia. It's everywhere. The way things done in one place is the way things are done at that place. And you start to learn habits and culture of the place, but not necessarily of how it's done elsewhere. And it's really good to get insight from elsewhere. Also, it's really nice to have someone to talk to if there is a development locally. I guess someone outside to talk to and steer you in the right direction. And just to get a taste of what else is happening in rural Australia, as much as we try to keep in touch, we do tend to be relatively isolated. And so developments that could help oftentimes come a bit late. But the other thing, and even more importantly, is in rural medicine, I think we're incredibly innovative. And oftentimes I'll go to hear at conferences and big centers where they talk about this great new system they developed that we've been using for 10 years. And so it's also important, I think, for Australia, for us to get out and say, here's what we do. Here's how we've tackled that problem. Here's how we solved this issue. So I think you'll benefit from it, certainly, but Australia benefits from it. Your colleagues benefit from it, not just the immediate colleagues.
Yeah. Just before we touch on some of the, I guess, the importance of workplace culture, I'm interested in what your perspective is, and particularly around family, because a lot of, people or that don't necessarily know rural communities worry about the quality of education for their children, worry about, the opportunities that their children will have. And I know both of your children have done extremely well, and you're very proud of them, as you should be. But I guess, again, your insights into education that's available, and what are some things to look out for people who are maybe thinking about moving to a rural town?
Yeah, so we chose to have both of our children stay in the public system and graduate from Kingaroy High School. They both have done very well. My daughter will be Dr. Lewandowski at the end of the year this year. She's about to finish medical school, and my son is a senior developer with a company in Melbourne, and he's done extremely well. So I don't think they really missed out. The certainly in the city with the big schools have a lot more things that you can have, and it's always a difficult decision, isn't it, to balance the importance of being close to family versus the importance of getting that extra thing. But I think certainly the rural schools, at least Kingaroy, had the ability to provide everything you needed for a successful future. In fact, I guess one of our doctors in Kingaroy graduated from Kingaroy High School as well. So I think that there's certainly educational opportunities and progression that are afforded in rural towns. A lot of people do, though. A lot of rural doctors will send their children to boarding schools as they get farther on. And I'm sure that there are benefits to that too. It's a choice we decided not to make.
Yeah, but really don't rule out rural just because of potentially children's education. There is lots of opportunity there. It's not
there is, and there's lots of learning outside of education too that you can get in a rural school. And the other thing, I guess, that we notice is that the schools, and I don't have anything to compare to because I came from America, so I don't know what this school would have been like in Brizzy. But our kids got a lot of really good special attention. They got propelled, and my son's in a career that they didn't even offer the course in school, but he got taught about programming and things because he got that special attention from his maths teacher. So there are lots of opportunities, and again, learning that's not necessarily curriculum.
Yep, nice. So looking at the culture, and I'll say I believe you built up one of the best medical teams that exists. But well,
I
I
agree.
mean, it's been 8 years since I left Kingaroy, and what I love, and I think it's a huge reflection on the team that you built up, is that it's still a very tight knit team, and everyone's moved on, but it's a group of people that still come back together. And I guess looking back, I'm interested for you to share what some of the key elements were, or key things that you did that helped create that team environment.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess first of all, what happened was I had that team. I mean, I think that group of people are unique, and that we're really fortunate to be together. So it's not something I didn't just make a group of people into a good team. I think I had a good group of people who we were able to form into a team. I think what we did is, and I can't, I say we because, Dennis was there, you were there. I didn't do things. We all did things, but I feel like that one of the things we did is we invested in the people. Everybody was involved. We tried to make sure that everyone had a say in things that were going on, that they all were experts in different areas or had different expertises. We took advantage of that. We also respected what their needs were. So everybody had different needs for education, for family, et cetera. And we made sure to allow for that no two people were the same. And so we couldn't try to force this cookie cutter thing into things. People had needed different schedules, different times off, different abilities at work. And so we try to capitalize on that too. We met as a team, and it really genuinely asked for and then used the input of the team. So we didn't have those meetings that you sometimes go to where, it's kind of lip service. You get to sit around to offer your opinion on something that's already done and dusted. We brought everything to them, and people pitched their ideas. That we used them because they were very knowledgeable, and then tried to adjust every system based on that. We also tried to keep our priorities in line. So, we recognize as a team that we were there to improve the health of the South Burnett, and we were focused on the people when we met, and our purpose, as opposed to our purpose of just being happy, I guess. So we had purpose driven. We had everyone's input. Everyone had value, and we were flexible.
What do you think the importance of, training and education? One of the things in looking back is that you were very committed, and maybe through Dennis's influence, being previously from JCU, but he and you were both very committed to ensuring that there was protected time for, education, for training and things like that. And I guess, what is the importance of that in developing a culture where those things are valued?
Yeah, well, it's critical. I think anything, if you want a culture where something is valued, you have to honestly value it. So, a lot of times there are things where we'll say we value this, but then we don't put any time to it. If we really value education, you're right, there has to be time to education. And I can't say that actually we did that perfectly, but I feel like we really strived to make sure that we all had that time. We did set up the education center and the program. I think education and ongoing professional development is critical to good medical care and to a good team. I think for rural communities, we also have to have the ability to educate at every level so that we can grow our own, in the, so to speak. So I do think that's critical. And I think, again, if you think it's critical, then you have to make it critical. If it's important, you have to make it important. And so we did. We strove to design things around a program that met people's educational need, that gave them time to participate in that education. And then that let them both be the educator and the educated. And I think everybody, I can't think of a single exception to this, was involved in teaching as well as receiving education.
Excellent. Now, you've moved on, and I guess now you're up in Cairns, and you've also been working at Innisfail for a few years. Are there other things that that you've learned, or insights that you've gained along the way? The regular one is you've been to one rural town, so now you've been to at least two.
Yeah, well, an event to Weepa, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Rural medicine is very different. Yeah, and it is. I know Bruce Chater says he's not the one who said that one rural town, but he's the one I'm going to always remember saying. Um, he definitely quoted some American though, actually, if that's interesting enough. The But yeah, I think that that's the one of the beauties of rural medicine too, is that it's not the same. You don't move from one place to the other. I guess it can be a bit stressful because you're not going to leave one place and end up in a place that does everything the same, and that's because the environments are all different, the cultures are different. Some places are more austere than others, obviously, and you kind of have to figure out the best way to get good care, and you have to provide good care, not a way to pretend like care is good. It's not. But there are other ways to provide the care, and it does require a lot of adaptation. But it's exciting. I also find that you pretty much every rural town you get to really use the skills you learn throughout your training. You're not pigeonholed into one set of skills and doing one thing, and it's really invigorating.
You've now stepped in, well, you've stepped a while ago, you stepped into sort of more of that medico-political and advocacy space as RDAQ President and now as RDAA President. We don't have a lot of international doctors participating, particularly in the rural space. So what would be your message to your international colleagues that are working in Australia, and what's the importance of getting involved?
Yeah, listen, I think it's critical to get involved. A lot of the things, going back to the Kruk report, a lot of the things in that report, when we talk about them in public, seem new information to a lot of people who are hearing them, and people those. If you've had the struggles or you've had difficulties getting through different hoops and loops, and you know that they're hard, and you in a way you might even feel the system is against you. But the truth is, the system doesn't know that that's a problem because we don't speak up. It's really important to get the message out there, because what I found is that people are receptive at all levels. Then things happen that are frustrating and seem a bit silly, but they actually happened for a purpose, and the people who made them happen didn't have the insight or the feedback they need to make the changes to make them better. And what I'm finding is that people really are receptive. They are happy to make the changes to some extent. Not everyone's always happy with everything, but it's not the doom and gloom. People didn't make rules to make it difficult. They made rules, guidelines, hurdles for purpose. And when they hear feedback, honest feedback, they are happy to make those changes, and they get insight into making more. But we've got to speak. Now, the other thing with the internationals, I know a lot of times there's a fear that you're going to be thrown out of the country. You're going to lose your visa. I think that's actually not that realistic a fear. There's no one's out there. The process isn't out there to throw you out of the country. In fact, Australia wants us here. We're part of the healthcare system. In rural health, we're about half the healthcare system. So it's not that they don't not want you here. And I think the fear is a bit overblown, if not altogether unfounded. But I think that keeps people from speaking up. But I encourage you to speak up. To get involved, to let our voices be heard.
Yes. Okay, we finish these little interviews with a quick fire round, so get ready. Just first thing that pops into your mind. Your favourite band or singer?
Rich Mullins.
Okay. Best place you've ever worked?
Ooh, I gotta go quick fire, huh? Kingaroy.
Okay. Your favourite colour?
That team. Blue.
Okay. The Australian or the US health system?
Australian.
Okay. And final thought, what do you know now that you wished you knew as a new medical graduate just coming out of medical school?
I wish I knew when I graduated what a great medical system and opportunities there were here in Australia. And I might not have spun my wheels for 12 years in the States before I got over here.
RT, Thank you for joining me, and I appreciate it.
No, thanks a lot, Peter.